General Petraeus, he is a partner at KKR. He is chairman of the KKR Global Institute and the new chairman of KKR Middle East. He is a co-author and best-selling book, Conflict, The Evolution of Warfare from 1945 to Ukraine. He has served over 37 years in the U.S. military, culminating with 6 consecutive commands as general officer, including command of the surge in Iraq and command of the U.S. Central Command. He also served as director of the CIA, but don't tell anybody. General Petraeus is a model soldier, scholar, and he's committed to peacemaking, which I think is a true quality that every soldier should have, and General Petraeus certainly does. I cannot wait to hear what's on his mind with respect to the future of the world and of U.S.-Arab relations. And interviewing the general today, part of what is becoming an annual tradition for the National Council, is another longtime friend of the council, Raghida Dergham. For most of you, she doesn't really need an introduction. I'm doing it anyway. She is the founder and executive chairwoman of the Beirut Institute and a columnist for The National. She served as columnist, senior diplomat correspondent, and New York bureau chief for the leading Arabic daily El Hayat for 28 years. Again, she started when she was 11. While I'm sure that all of you would like to learn a lot more by simply interviewing her today as a consummate interviewer and to engage with General Petraeus in a fireside chat that I'm sure you will all find tremendously illuminating. Raghida, are you here or down here?
I am with you, if you can hear me.
Oh, we up here. Up here. There we go. I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you for joining us live, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roosevelt, and I want to thank you and also Jean-Luc Anthony for this opportunity that has become a tradition, a lovely tradition, I must say, that I have this conversation, a privilege for me with General Petraeus, and we normally get right to it, but I want to also thank Mr. John Pratt and for sure Patrick Massino for making sure that this tradition goes on. General Petraeus, are you with me yet? Good evening.
I am.
Good morning.
Delighted to be with the National Council. I echo your thanks and congratulations to John Duke and to Pat Mancino and all the others that are part of this great organization and make this kind of thing happen.
Thank you, Gerald, for making the time for this very timely conversation. Quite honestly, we have no other option but to speak about the very important trip, to begin with, of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, known normally as MBS. And of course, this is marking a very important turn in the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States. Is KSA anchoring USA, or is it the opposite?
Well, I think it's mutual. And this visit today is truly historic. President Trump is treating this as a state visit, even though technically the head of state is, of course, the king. But he is according those honors to the Crown Prince here. There will be a formal military arrival ceremony, Oval Office discussions, and so forth. And even a state dinner tonight, a black tie dinner. So a very significant event and a lot of substance, I think, is going to come out of this. We expect to see, above all, the signing of a mutual defense pact, similar probably to what the president did for Qatar in the wake of the attack by Israel on the Hamas leaders who were there at a time when they were trying to negotiate with them, of course. There will also likely be approval of up to 48 F-35 stealth fighter bombers for Saudi Arabia. This will be the first such sale in the Middle East outside of those to Israel. There will be a discussion of the way forward in Gaza, likely the KSA contributing to the reconstruction, although obviously there also has to be a resolution of how to disarm Hamas, and that is something that is still very much out there and not complete yet, even though the UN Security Council approved yesterday essentially the President Trump 20 steps plan. There will also be discussions of civil nuclear power support for KSA investment. Remember, they pledged $600 billion when the president was in Riyadh a few months ago, and how will that be spent and so forth. So again, a very, very substantive, but also very symbolic and important visit.
Let's start to unpack what you just mentioned, General Petraeus. The Mutual Defense Pact that was signed between the US and Qatar is not a treaty, it's by executive order. Is this with the expected pact between the United States and Saudi Arabia in the same league, or is it more or less? And what is the difference between that sort of a pact and a treaty in terms of defining the relationship?
Sure. Obviously, a treaty has to be ratified by the Congress. This is an executive order, but a very significant commitment by the President of the United States. And I suspect something that other presidents will honor going forward. So again, a very important step forward, I believe.
The F-35s, again, there's been, some people say it is the crown of this trip because no other Arab country or other countries in general get this sort of a privilege. But then some other people are saying there are different types of F-35s, and the one that would be or could be or will be given to Saudi Arabia is not the same. I ask as a military man, obviously, it's not the same like that given to Israel or to Canada. Can you explain to us the difference?
I'm not sure I can, actually, because I don't know the inner workings of this particular deal. But it's common that you have in aircraft different blocks. They're often called, for example, the F-16 block that the UAE has. Actually, it's a better F-16 than the one that we have. We then graduated to the F-35. So again, I'm not sure what will be different about it, candidly. It's not uncommon to have different sales of different iterations of the aircraft. And you'll have to ask somebody who understands the particulars of this particular contract. I can tell you, though, that regardless, this is an extraordinary aircraft. We saw what it did to Iran when the Israelis used it to essentially take out the entire sophisticated Russian-provided S-300 counter-air and ballistic missile defense system, something we weren't sure could be done, in fact, until it was actually carried out in the early stages of the 12-day war, which we joined in, of course, on the final day with some F-35s, but more importantly, the B-2 bombers that could drop the massive ordnance penetrator. So again, it is a very significant decision by a president of the United States to sell this to the kingdom. Again, only Israel has it in the region. There are people that question whether China somehow could get access. I just don't buy that. I'm sure there will be very, very significant safeguards and mitigating measures about that. Also, the qualitative military edge issue with respect to Israel. I don't think Israel expects Saudi Arabia to use these against them anytime soon. In fact, another discussion point undoubtedly will be what would it take for the KSA to join the Abraham Accords? And I think the response will be, as we have heard publicly from the kingdom in the past, an ironclad commitment to a two-state solution for the Palestinian people.
Which is not coming from the Israelis so far, not even close to it. But I want to get into that in some more details after I finish with a couple of questions on the military side, because I'm quite curious. Because the Saudis had been saying they just don't want to, I mean, they welcome, of course, they appreciate all, especially the F-35s, but in general, they'd like to have a stronger military and security relationship with the United States. You mentioned the qualitative edge that Israel has always enjoyed. How would this have been compensated to the Saudis, given that they do want much more sort of, enhanced security guarantees from the United States?
Well, again, first is going to be the Mutual Defense Pact, and that is very significant. But also, I do expect that there will be discussion of further upgrade of Saudi military equipment, also contributions in the area of military training, perhaps some basing arrangements for the United States and the kingdom. We've had that in the past, as you know, and then shut them down, years after the Gulf War or what have you. So again, all of
Tell
this.
us more about this part. Tell us more about the new expanded bases or base that is being, right now being worked for Saudi Arabia. Tell us more about that, please.
Well, I don't.
It has shifted to Qatar because the American presence has shifted to the Qatar base, U.S. base in Qatar,
Well,
and
many
now
other bases, actually.
yes,
There are bases up and down the Gulf states. There's a huge Army headquarters and logistics base in Kuwait. As you come on down, the naval base is in Bahrain. There's another airfield there if we need that. There are basing arrangements in the UAE, of course, a major air base there. And of course, you have the Central Command headquarters forward and the Air Force Central Command in Qatar at the enormous air base Al Udeid outside Doha.
So the significance
this apparently will include some kind of basing arrangement. But again, I can't anticipate what it is specifically. They haven't leaked everything to the public or announced everything to the public. You have to allow them to have a few things to talk about, which will then be introduced after the actual meetings have concluded.
You're not an average public, General Petraeus. That's why we ask a little more. But before I leave this point, what is the significance of the return, if you will, of the strong U.S. military presence in a strong and expanded base in Saudi Arabia?
Well, again, this is both symbolic and substantive. We had very substantial bases there, of course, to enable the liberation of Kuwait and the destruction of the Iraqi forces that had invaded that country and were threatening the kingdom. That stayed in place, in reduced numbers, of course, because we withdrew the combat forces by and large that had carried out that operation. And gradually reduced the footprint in the kingdom. Eventually, then, as I mentioned, shifted to other bases in the region. So a return is, again, very significant. This is a huge decision for the kingdom, and it's a huge decision for the United States. And again, it's both symbolic of a strengthened relationship, the capstone of which will be, again, provision of the most advanced weapons systems to the kingdom, but also, again, the defense pact, the mutual defense pact, that will be the capstone, I think, of this visit, even given the F-35 and other issues that will also be agreed.
A very knowledgeable person, professor, very renowned, who has very great contacts with the top leadership in Saudi Arabia, said that, in fact, the Saudis would like to host in their territory, of course, on the American bases, the nuclear capability of the United States. We're not talking now with the civilian one. We're talking about, the actual nuclear capability, the militarized one, because they feel that this would be an important deterrent to them. What do you think about that? Would they get it, or what? And why would they want that?
I'm just not sure why that is necessary. Again, if you have a mutual defense pact, that means that all that we have available around the world is available, if necessary, as a deterrent. Again, this is a weapon that should deter the use by others. And again, I don't see the compelling logic for deploying those to the kingdom in this case.
But what about the fact that they would like it?
I don't know that they would like it necessarily. Again, there is a very significant number of cons as well as some pros in this case. This could be needlessly provocative in some respects. Other countries in the region, Iran obviously particularly, might say that this is a reason that they should have a counter capability in some respect. Of course, that's not going to happen because as a result of the 10/7 attacks on Israel, the Israelis have changed very significantly their national security orientation. And I think correctly, they will no longer allow a threat to develop while they're watching it, not just in their neighborhood, but all the way when it comes to Iran itself. And I'm very confident if there is any hidden stockpile of highly enriched uranium and or advanced centrifuges, that they will eventually be discovered by Mossad or the CIA or some other intelligence organization. And when that happens, the Israelis and possibly the Americans will take care of that. Again, they're not going to sit by and watch adversaries, potential or otherwise, develop the kind of capabilities that they had, Hezbollah in addition, Hamas, and so forth, that they had on 10/6.
The Mutual Defense Pact that you spoke about, you remember that Saudi Arabia signed or committed with Pakistan to the Mutual Defense Pact. Would that have been one of the reasons why the United States, the President of the United States, is now willing to accord that to the Saudis to push Pakistan out of the way? Because, I mean, some people feel this was, it rang a bell that's not a very comfortable one for the United States, that such a pact would really be enhanced or take place.
We've long had, if you will, some sort of special relationship with the Pakistanis. This is fairly substantive in certain respects. The Saudis have repeatedly supported Pakistan when its hard currency reserves have dwindled and so forth. There have been military exchanges and so on. And certainly now the Pakistanis are also supported quite substantially by China. There is great power rivalry dynamic here at play. That's the more important, I think. Again, in terms of mutual defense, I'm not sure what deployable capabilities that would be useful are present in that particular agreement, whereas with the United States, with an extraordinary arsenal of capabilities that can be deployed on relatively short notice, the situation is very different.
Speaking of China, General Petraeus, there has been a very strong relationship between Saudi Arabia and China in terms of technology and AI. And it seems that there is now, during this trip, readiness by the United States to enhance the relation, to give more technology, openness to technology, to AI from the US to Saudi Arabia. Is that, by any chance, would you think it's a very smart move to counter China's influence and such a relationship with Saudi Arabia? Is that a smart investment by the United States to just drive away China a bit?
Well, I think it is absolutely the right approach. It's what we've done with the UAE as well, as you know. Yes. AI certainly will be a feature of the conversation. I would imagine both in terms of what we might make available to Saudi Arabia and what investments Saudi Arabia might make in the United States when it comes to AI and the enabling infrastructure and so forth. Also, by the way, rare earths. China has shown how significant the lever is that they have when it comes to selling strategic minerals and rare earths around the world. It's one of the initiatives that China used to bring the United States to the table to discuss tariffs and various elements within the trade exchange between the United States and China. So no, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Again, we've done it already in the region. The UAE, which is an extraordinary growing AI power and an extraordinary location for innovation and entrepreneurship.
The strategic alliance or relationship alliance, I think there is probably a strategic alliance now between the United States and Saudi Arabia. Is this, how does it really fit into two things, if you don't mind? One is the vision of MBS, which is not only for the Saudis. The Vision 2030 really is about the Middle East altogether, to be prosperous, to move forward, to reinvent itself. That with President Trump's plan for Gaza and the Middle East, they seem to have something in common, which is the aspiring for peace, for development, for investments, for the fact that they meet together in some ways. Is this a significant part of that strategic alliance in your view?
Oh, absolutely. You were at Davos in the desert, FII, in Riyadh a few weeks ago, as I was.
Yes.
Of course, what that is all about in many respects is the very ambitious plans that are captured in Vision 2030, which include diversification of the kingdom's economy from oil and gas and related industries into many, many other sectors, and many other initiatives in the largest of the Gulf states. And so they need outside investment for this, even as they are investing certainly around the world as well to solidify relations with countries like the United States. So no question that this is part and parcel of the vision of the kingdom. And of course, Mohammed bin Salman has been the one who has really propelled that. He developed Vision 2030, and then he has been the one who has been driving the execution of the various components needed to make that vision a reality.
So now that brings me now to the point you raised earlier, General Petraeus, which is about Gaza and the issue of normalization with Israel and how much of a hurdle, or maybe it won't be a hurdle at all, in the way of a further normalized relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia, an enhanced alliance. But the problem begins and ends still with what you made very clear, is that the Saudis made it absolutely clear, to the shock of many in DC and New York, that no, they're not going to budge on this issue of the principle of two-state solution, the principle of state for Palestine, and they are serious about it. They have taken that very serious. So how much is this, as I said, going to be ammunition in the hands of people in the Congress who's going to say, no, we're not going to go that far in the relationship with Saudi Arabia as long as they hold this position?
Actually, to the contrary, I would suspect that President Trump and many in Congress will use the Saudi insistence as a factor or as a feature in trying to help bring that about, noting that obviously the barbarity of the 10/7 attacks, just horrific actions by Hamas on that day, undermine the prospects for that enormously. You also obviously have the political dynamics in Jerusalem, which make it very, very difficult. And it's now supported by far less than a majority of the people. Nonetheless, there's no great alternative that anyone has ever proposed. And the Saudis, in response to 10/7 and the then operations in Gaza, have actually raised the bar, if you will, for what's needed that they'll have to get over in order to join the Abraham Accords. And that's all widely known because it's all been publicly discussed by the Crown Prince and many others from the kingdom. So that will be that's a feature of this overall discussion. And until that's resolved, I just don't think that you're going to see the kingdom join the Abraham Accords as close as they were prior to 10/7. You'll recall that arguably one of the reasons for the timing of the Hamas attacks was to put a stick in the spokes of that vehicle, which was developing a bit of momentum with those in the White House thinking they might actually bring it to closure within weeks of what ended up being 10/7.
Right. No, I totally agree with you, but I also want to point out that from the point of view of Saudis, it is also the horrific actions by Israel that really gathered momentum, not only within the royal family, but on a domestic level, that no, they cannot accept such atrocities by Israel in answer to the atrocities of Hamas on October 7th to stand. I mean, that's what happened. It's Israel that changed the momentum, not only Hamas. So where do we go from here, knowing that the American public and Congress remains, just although they are angry with Israel, but they remain, with allegiance to Israel. How far would the Congress allow the further development of the American-Saudi relationship if this normalization is still off because Israel does not accept a two-state solution, or because it is working on annexing the West Bank further. So where do we go in the future, given where everyone stands?
Well, first of all, the U.S.-Saudi relationship is going to continue to deepen regardless of this. This would be a fantastic feature if there could be the conditions established to enable the Saudis to join Abraham Accords. But I think everyone involved in this right now realizes that that's probably not something that is, as they say, coming soon to a theater near us. What is much more important right now is figuring out how to move forward in Gaza. President Trump did a very impressive job in both threatening Hamas through interlocutors and also then pushing Prime Minister Netanyahu to get the agreement. The challenge was, of course, that beyond the first phase of the agreement, you run into a very substantial obstacle, and that is, of course, disarmament of Hamas. This is not something that the Israeli Defense Forces have been able to do. I think it's unlikely that there is some international force out there that is going to be willing to go in. And you've heard me before describe what should have been done here from the beginning to achieve the Israeli objectives, not just to provide a better life for the Palestinian people in Gaza without Hamas in their lives. But a clear and leave approach does not produce that, nor does it destroy Hamas. Israel's first objective, keep Hamas from governing again, although it did in the end, they did have agreement on that very important first phase objective, which is, of course, the exchange of the remaining Israeli living hostages and gradually the bodies of those who died in captivity in return for a very substantial number of Palestinian detainees. But how do you go forward here? And again, let me note how impressive the Israeli operations against Hezbollah have been. You know that well. You're a citizen of Beirut. It enabled the election of a president and other positions. How impressive the 12-day air campaign and ground operations by intelligence services were in Iran. But when it comes to Gaza, there is not the resolution of the issue of how do you actually achieve security for the people themselves. The area of Gaza that Israel controls, maybe some 40 to 45% or so, has very, very few, if any, Palestinian civilians in it. And yet that's what you need to create. And you've heard me before say the way to do that was what we did in the surge in Iraq when we went from conducting clear and leave operations, which had an ephemeral effect, to clear, hold, build, and gradually transition using population control measures, gated communities, walls, and biometric ID cards, and so forth. I still think that is the answer, but I just don't see what force can be found to do that, noting that, again, the IDF is not even carrying that out. And it's the security component without which you cannot really do the reconstruction. Arab forces will not go into Gaza and fight what will be seen as fighting Hamas, fellow Arabs, on behalf of Israel. So this is the conundrum that has to be addressed at this point.
So
some of those on the ground can come up with some kind of solution to this, where you gradually secure areas, clear them completely of Hamas, bring the people back into the areas where their homes were, noting the enormous damage and destruction of all infrastructure in Gaza, and then begin the kind of reconstruction that is only possible, including bringing in Arab forces and ultimately Palestinian security forces, which ideally would have been trained all the time over the past 2 years at the Jordanian International Police Training Center. But that's not the case. And so we are where we are now in this, and it's a major conundrum.
Yes, and because of that, we are now in a place where Hamas is resisting disarming. Hezbollah, you mentioned Hezbollah in Lebanon, is declaring that it refuses to disarm. Then Iran is encouraging at least Hezbollah to say, hold on and don't allow that sovereignty of the country, of the government to force you to disarm. So what happens next? If they refuse to disarm, Hamas and Hezbollah go on refusing to disarm, what do you expect the President of the United States would do to force his plan, the Trump plan, to go into the path of success?
Well, these are two separate issues, actually, and we need to address them separately. Hezbollah has been dramatically degraded. Its leadership was decimated, not just decapitated, by the brilliant pager intelligence operation and then by the explosion of all the walkie-talkies the next day.
Forgive me to interrupt you. Not just because the Israelis are claiming otherwise. They are saying they have regathered their strength. They are back into their. So I just want to.
Hezbollah is trying to reconstitute, no question, and Israel will not allow them to regain the kind of strength that they had in the past. This is why they've conducted dozens of operations against Hezbollah just in the recent week or two. And they will continue to do that if Lebanon's military does not disarm Hezbollah. So that's what you can expect there. You will not see Hezbollah reconstituted because Syria is no longer an ally of Iran and will no longer allow the transit across its soil as Bashar al-Assad used to, the military weapon systems, munitions, via all the rest of that to enable the reconstitution of Hezbollah. There will be efforts to bring it in through the airport or through ships or through smuggling or whatever. That is not going to be enough to reconstitute Hezbollah, but it is not necessary for Israel to occupy southern Lebanon. In fact, that's been done before. And again, that did not necessarily achieve the objectives over time there. So again, what they will do with Hezbollah is continue to keep them degraded so that they cannot conduct the kind of operation that was most feared prior to the pager and walkie-talkies blowing up, which is to overwhelm the Israeli air, ballistic missile, and counter-drone defenses with 10,000 or so all simultaneously. They can no longer do that, and the threat to Israel, therefore, has been dramatically reduced, and Israel will keep it reduced. Gaza is an entirely separate matter. With respect to Gaza, the question is, who is going to disarm Hamas? Because if you do not disarm Hamas and bring in an international force, you cannot provide security for the people. Now, again, the UN Security Council resolution, in that there is a provision of an international security force. My question is, what country is going to provide that force, noting that this is a very vicious Islamist extremist terrorist group that will have hundreds of miles still of underground infrastructure from which to fight. And whatever force does this is going to take serious casualties.
I want to focus back on Lebanon, but very quickly on Gaza. You think that the president's plan for Gaza is in danger now of faltering, of falling apart? And would Donald Trump allow it to fall apart? Or would he take further action? What kind of action would it be other than telling the Israelis, go and get them big time?
Well, first and foremost, there is a success with the UN Security Council voting, those that voted unanimously to approve the plan that President Trump sent to the United Nations. The question now is how to implement it. And again, you come back to this issue of what force is going to go in and disarm Hamas. By the way, it's not just disarm Hamas. It's going to have to be, you're going to have to detain a number of these individuals so that they cannot reconstitute in Gaza. So this is a very substantial task. This is what we did during the surge in Iraq in places like Fallujah, Ramadi, Baquba, parts of Baghdad, Mosul, and so on. Again, this is a house-to-house, but it's a clear and hold using walls and so forth that you create. You've heard me come a kilometer down from the north east-west wall, 12 miles, 3 north-south walls. You now have 4 gated communities. You can clear these and keep Hamas out of them with operations, but they're going to fight you. And it's going to get tougher and tougher as you go further north to south. But that's what's required to provide the kind of security. And then you use biometric ID cards, get the people back in areas where their homes were and so forth.
Got you on that.
What force is going to do that? Noting that the Israelis were not able to do that, despite suggestions repeatedly from many of us publicly that the key is achieving to getting a better future for the Palestinian people in Gaza without Hamas in their lives is this kind of clear, hold, build transition approach.
I'm starting to have a little time to address 100 things, but let me go back to Lebanon for a quick question here on Lebanon. So you don't think, if I hear you correctly, you don't think the Israelis need to re-invade big time and to have a very sort of wide military operation in order to get at Hezbollah? You're saying that, well, they can just do the, whatever that expression is in the military sense, the pointed attacks, targeted attacks, and that will be enough. You're saying you don't expect that the Israelis will have a big operation in Lebanon, military operation?
I think they are having quite a substantial operation now and have for, again, recent weeks in terms of an air campaign with precision munitions, absolutely. And they're continuing the damage and destruction of the remaining major capabilities of Hezbollah that are most threatening to them. They'll do select operations on the ground. There still is a presence in some areas also determining how they're going to deploy forces essentially on the Syrian border, where that border actually will be, whether there's some kind of direct line to the Druze, et cetera. There's a number of thorny issues. And of course, Ahmed al-Shara, who was in the White House just recently as well.
Right.
Of course, we need to do everything we can to enable the success in Syria, a country through which lies every ethnic, sectarian, and tribal fault line of the Middle East, and try to bring that together. But again, we should be skeptical about what he's trying to do, given his background, including 5 years in detention in Iraq, including during the period that I was the commander of the surge. But we nonetheless should provide every possible opportunity and assistance to Syria to make that a successful outcome.
General Petraeus, don't get angry with me with what I'm going to say now. When you interviewed Shara in New York, you did not express such skeptical notion. You were quite full of admiration for the man. Why is that? Why you did not question him with the idea that we should treat him with skeptical approach? Why is that?
You might want to re-listen to parts of the transcript, but I would say that what he has done is truly remarkable. Regardless of the path that brought him to where he is, what he did in Idlib when he finally cut away from the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria and built HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, in Idlib, and actually created community services, education, and built a real military capability. To overthrow Bashar al-Assad, who had been on the throne for decades after his father.
Who helped him militarily to do that? With whose help did he get in order to accomplish that militarily? Who helped him from the outside? Is it Turkey?
He had financial assistance from Qatar, and also there was some assistance from Turkey. But keep in mind that this is an area that was already awash with weapons. And what he needed to do is turn what are a lot of essentially tribal militias and other armed groups into a coherent military force that could initially liberate Aleppo, the second largest city. He did that, and it fell much more rapidly than even he thought. That meant that he could try Hama. He did Homs, and then the road to Damascus was open. He took it, and without support this time for Bashar al-Assad from Hezbollah, which was already more than preoccupied and very substantially degraded, from Iran, the Revolutionary Guards Corps Quds Force, but also Revolutionary Guards members, and also Russian air power and special operations forces. All of a sudden, that turned out to be a very brittle regime capability, and it toppled again much more rapidly than any of us thought. So this is a very substantial. This is how many decades was Hafez al-Assad and his son.
But then you said skeptical. But then you correctly said we need to be skeptical. On the other hand, I've
said that on many occasions, actually. This is, the old Reagan, don't trust, verify.
Right.
But nonetheless, give every opportunity.
Right, exactly.
And I've said as well that lifting the Caesar sanctions for good by Congress, there should be conditions on that also.
Allow me, General Petraeus. I was sitting with Tom Barrack, who is the special envoy to Syria, just a couple of weeks ago in Manama, and at the Manama Dialogue. And he was always saying that there is no plan B to Sharia in Syria.
That's why you need to give every opportunity for success, while being, again, holding him to what he has said he will do. He said on the stage with me that he is essentially trying to establish a government that will be representative of all the elements of a country, which again have all the ethnic, sectarian, tribal, and political elements in the Middle East, and ensure not just majority rule, but minority rights. And that's absolutely critical. And that's what we should hold him to account to do.
Are we doing that enough?
Well, we're still in the very early stages, but yes, I think there's a lot of focus on, you must do this, be sure but again, think about how are you going to resolve this? This is a patchwork quilt. You have the Turkish aligned Free Syrian Army in the north, you have the Alawites out on the coast, you have HTS down to the capital and a bit beyond. You have the American-supported Syrian Kurds, the Syrian Democratic Forces. You have another U.S. presence that has a refugee camp around it. And then there's even some disparate forces in the south, the Druze and others close to Jordan. This is a massive task, and he is embarked on it. But again, we should do everything we can to smooth the path before him to enable him to do that, but also hold him to account for doing it while he is.
I need you to give me quick answers on several questions. Do you think that, first of all, is there going to be a serious return for a military presence of the United States in Syria, an expanded one?
I think there will be some modest presence, and there will be a diplomatic presence. Obviously, there will be an intelligence presence if it's not already there. But I don't expect to see something beyond what is up in the Syrian Democratic Forces area right now in terms of really significant. We can do what we might need to do in Syria, which is to prevent the reconstitution of the Islamic State there, ensure the security of the detainees in the Al-Hol detention facility, et cetera, et cetera. That can largely be done. You don't need to have a huge base. And we do have bases in many, many of the areas around Syria.
How do you look at what do you think of the Turkish-Israeli equation in Syria? Do you think these escalations sometimes are just skirmishes? Because Tom Barrack, again, he says they will never have a war between them over Syria, Turkey and Israel. That in a way he was indicating that maybe there is an arrangement between the two of them, probably with the knowledge of the United States. So you think Turkey and Israel are just, are they at the verge of clashing seriously, or they're just skirmishes between them?
I don't think they're in the verge of clashing, and there are other issues between Turkey and Israel as well, needless to say. But no, I think this is not something that's going to precipitate violence between Turkey and Israel, depending on the actions of each country. And I don't think that they necessarily collide. They're much more geographic within Syria. The security interests of Turkey, obviously, in the north, and the elements that they have traditionally supported up there, trying to figure out how they're going to work with the Syrian Democratic Forces, especially now that they've got the agreement with Öcalan, the PKK leader, if you will. So again, many, many different dynamics here, but I don't see any kind of imminent clash between the two countries.
And do you see an imminent security agreement between Israel and Syria, that sort of normalization of the borders as step one to normalization between the two countries?
That could be down the road, and there should be some kind of agreement between Syria and Israel as well, although not the Abraham Accords. I actually, in my interview of him, I said, only Nixon could go to China.
Yes, I heard it, yeah.
Could you go to Jerusalem, Ahmed al-Shara? And he said, no, that is more than a bit premature. But there will have to be discussions about where Israeli forces will be positioned within what used to be Syria, And what will the Syrians do to ensure that the Druze are not treated as they were
I wish I had more time to.
months ago, at the same time that there was also violence against the Alawites in the coast.
Right. I wish I had more time because this is a fascinating subject for me, but I need to ask you about Iraq because you've been there recently. Before Iraq, I have a quick question on Lebanon again. The administration, they told the general, the head of the army here of Lebanon, Rudolf Heikel, that you're not welcome to come and visit because he had a planned visit to Washington, and they said, no, don't come. The U.S. says that they want to support the Lebanese army. And do you think that this is a needed position to just tell him straighten out vis-a-vis Hezbollah, or will this undermine the army and his leadership of the army?
This is probably part of the negotiations to put the pressure on the Lebanese military to disarm Hezbollah. It's a very necessary step. And then I've got to drop in just 2 minutes, I'm afraid, Raghida. So let me talk briefly about Iraq. Let me actually just talk about Iraq, please. So I just visited Baghdad a few weeks ago for the first time since I was the director of the CIA. So that's over 13 years. I was astonished to see the infrastructure improvements. The most dangerous road in the world from the airport to the old green zone is now a showplace. Has decorative lighting going up into the palm trees at night, manicured grass, smooth paved road, and all the rest.
And you love that country.
And everywhere there is construction in Baghdad. That doesn't mean that there are not very, very serious and sometimes almost intractable political issues in Iraq writ large, to a degree in the Kurdish region where I was as well, and even within one party in the Kurdish region. But the elections were held on 11 November. I think they were reasonably free and fair. And now we'll see what the outcome is of what's going to be an enormous amount of wrangling as they try to form coalitions that could get the requisite number of members of parliament. But again, it was very heartening for me to see a country for which we and coalition forces and Iraqis all sacrificed so much. And I hope that they can move forward together to realize the extraordinary potential of the land of the two rivers. But with that, Raghida, thanks as always. And I'm going to have to
and I want
very
to thank
best wishes to everyone there for a great.
I just want to tell you something. I want to tell you how powerful you are, because you wanted to go and the electricity went off in Lebanon, so that now I have to let you go instead of asking you about Iran and Yemen. But thank you for joining me again.
Thank you very much. You bet.
Let's have this
Great to
next
see you.
year. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
You know, we are so blessed to have General Petraeus be one of our regulars annually at this event. And whether it's on Zoom or whether it's live here in the room, after his comments, there's always part of me that is wondering, should he have really shared some of that stuff with us? You know, it's wonderful. The way he is so candid and so plain speaking. It's just it's a pleasure to hear his insights, and also always encouraging, at least to me, that there seems to be a plan when we're all thinking, my gosh, what else can go sideways? But it's very encouraging to hear his perspectives.